Okay, so let's create yet another extension to try out the next extension template that you get with your SharePoint framework. So in this case, we have a list on our site that we've created called Sales Leads. You can feel free to download the CSV of this data if you want to use the exact same data. But all you really need is to create your own list that has at least one number type column in it and create a couple of items in that list so that you can test this out if you're working along. And what we're going to do is we're going to create the field customizer extension type to actually customize, in this case, our rating field, which is a number type field, to be able to change the way it appears inside of this sales leads list. So let's give that a try. Let's jump over into Hyper, and we're going to make a directory called rating field. And let's cd into that, and we'll go ahead and run the Yeoman Microsoft SharePoint generator. And we're going to go through here and select SharePoint Online, use current folder, default admin deploy settings, and of course we are building an extension. And this time we're going to choose the Field Customizer extension. We're going to call this Rating Field, and we're going to set the default description and go ahead and choose the React template. And just like with your web parts, you can choose to utilize whatever UI framework that you want. You can load that in yourself using the no JavaScript framework template, or just use template strings. Or in this case, I know we want to use React, so let's go ahead and choose that one as the option for this extension. And that's going to install our npm dependencies, which is going to take just a moment. Great, so now that that's done, let's go ahead and open this up in Visual Studio Code. And just as before, within this solution, we have a source folder, which contains our rating field extension, and it has an entry file and a web part manifest. But because we chose the React template, we also have a rating field component inside of this components folder. And before we can load this up and test it, just like in our application customizer, we do need to go to config serve.json, and we need to actually define a page that we can actually test this on in our live environment. So what we'll do is we will switch back to Chrome. We will go ahead and copy this list address. We'll paste that into the page URL here, and we need to replace the internal field name with the actual internal field name of this particular column, which is in fact rating. So we'll just change that to rating. We can go ahead and delete this second object down here, just as we did before. And now when we save that and we switch back into Hyper, we can run gulp serve to go ahead and start this up. And that's going to ask if we want to load our debug scripts, which we do. So I'll close this old one. And you'll see the only thing it's doing by default is it's adding value : space before the rating number itself. So what a field customizer actually does is it is customizing the output or the format of your field values as they display inside of a list. It's not going to customize the edit experience, so users can still come in here and edit this, and the value of this Contoso list item is actually 25. But when it's actually displayed in your list view, you'll see you have a different format because that is being customized, the output of that. And this is kind of a neat opportunity because these list views are really, they can be, depending on what content you're working with, they can be a very vital aspect of how users interact with your modern SharePoint pages. So if you have a list where people are using it all the time, there's certainly going to be opportunities where you can use these field customizer extensions to kind of improve and extend the way that people can interact with and view the data within these lists. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll go into our Visual Studio solution here. We'll make a couple changes to the way that this is currently being output as just value, and we'll actually make this a more visceral and visual way to actually consume that rating information. Let's take a look at the entry file for this rating field customizer.ts file. And you'll notice in here, it has properties just like our other extensions, and that works the exact same as it did before, so no changes there. It also has a default class with rating field customizer extending base field customizer. And just as before, it has things like the context property, which is of type field customizer context, which has all of the normal stuff on it that you would expect to see, but it also has a .field reference, which can give you the field name, the display name, the internal name, whether it's required, just some extra stuff, because in this case, the context is actually for a specific field. It has an onInit method just as before. The onInit method in this case actually doesn't do anything. It's just logging some information. So we can actually, I don't usually like all this logging stuff that they provide by default. So we can actually delete a lot of that. And then up at the top here, we can even delete the log import there because we don't actually need that. And then as we scroll down here, you'll notice there is an onRenderCell and onDisposeCell method within this entry file. And basically what that means is whenever you are rendering each cell in the list, so in this case, each rating cell, you get this event that has the iField Customizer cell event parameters. And basically that event has information like what's the DOM element that's being used to render this, what's the current field value, what is the list item, in which case you can get the values of other fields on that list item, or even the user data, so who's interacting with this. So for example, if you get the field value in this case, you'll actually get the number 25, 85, and 60 respectively. And what they're doing by default is they're building this text string, and they're basically saying value colon, and then stick in the event.field value there. So we can actually change this. We can use this event.field value, pass that down to our React component, which is being created here as a React prop in our props for this component, this rating field component that's being created, and totally customize the way that field value is actually being displayed. The onDisposeCell method, on the other hand, is just doing some cleanup. So if you do need to do any cleanup, in this case, it unmounts the React component. You can just leave it as default if you don't really have to worry about that. And in this case, that's what we're going to do. But if for some reason you did need to do some cleanup, you can utilize that method to kind of do that whenever the item is deleted and that React component is no longer visible for whatever reason. Okay, so what we'll do is let's take a look at this rating field thing that we have over here, this rating field React component. And you'll notice it's also doing some what I would call obnoxious logging. So it's doing things like saying, hey, the rating field mounted and unmounted. And we just don't need that in this case. That's just kind of some boilerplate that you get. So again, I'll delete all this logging stuff. We'll just leave a very simple interface with our props and then our render method down below. So this is a really simple React component once we remove those. But in this case, I actually want to change the props from a string, which is text, to a rating, which is of type number. And let's go ahead and replace down here with text with rating in that case. And then we can save that, and now up here in our entry file, it's going to say, wait a second, we're trying to create a React element, and we're trying to pass this text prop, and it's not happy because there's a mismatch there. So what we can do is we can pass the rating down as event.field value. So it's going to have a rating prop on that rating field component that it is actually creating. And that way we no longer need this text thing up here. We've really kind of simplified our extension to just kind of render a rating field component, a React component, into each one of those cells when it's rendered. So let's give that a save, and we can simply come over here and refresh, and you'll see we're back to just a plain old value, but now we can do whatever we want with this. And in this case, it is a value between 0 and 100. So let's use that same pattern, that same display technique we used whenever we created our first web part, where we can maybe turn this into a donut chart to kind of show, in this case, the rating that our sales team is giving to each one of our sales leads. So what I'll actually do is we'll jump in here to rating field. We'll replace all the content of this render method. I'm going to paste in the same SVG that we had in our meter React web part that we built in a previous lesson. So when I paste this in, you'll see you get that SVG. It has all the stuff in there that we had previously, and it's trying to reference things like this.props.fill color. So in this case, we don't want to make the fill color customizable. So let's go ahead and put a color in there. And I'll just copy and paste the default color that we originally had for that. And then we need to replace this.props.percentage in all the places where that is used with this.props.rating. And then we're not using a show percentage value Boolean in this case, so let's just delete that ternary operator from here. And then hopefully when we hit save here, you'll actually see as we refresh, it's totally going to change the way the field actually displays. And that is pretty cool. This is probably taking up a bit too much room, and we can add some of the same styles that we had before. So let's go into our rating field module, our SAS file here, and let's add a couple of styles to clean this up and finish up our rating field customizer. So what I'll do is I'll create a donut class for the donut chart itself. We'll set a width and a height on this so it can't grow to be very large. And we'll also style the text or the label that appears within there to kind of line that up. And really, I'm just going to use the same styles that we used before. We're going to transform that and translate on the y-axis, which is previously we did 0.3 ems. We're going to bring down the font weight to 200 and set the font size to 0.8 ems or something like that. And then if we use this donut class, so we can actually, let's delete this class reference, and we'll change class name here to actually use styles.donut. And now when we refresh this and load our debug scripts, it's going to be much smaller and the text label will actually be rendered. And what's cool is I can come in and edit this just like I normally would to give this customer a rating of 50. And as soon as that saves, you'll see here, it bumps it up to 50 and our donut chart updates automatically. Cool. So the deployment of this is a little bit interesting because you wouldn't want to just say everywhere where you have a rating field, have it do this new thing. Because you could have a field on another list called rating that is a string. And you're typing in a text information about that rating. So you don't want to scope this in a way where it's going to update all of the rating fields everywhere. So when you actually deploy this, it's actually going to create a whole new column type, if you will, or a site column that you can add to any list once it has been created. So let's see what that looks like. Let's go through the process of deploying this to this particular site, and then we'll actually use this new customized field that we have created. The one difference with your deployment is that if we come over here and look at our SharePoint/assets, it has a single file called elements.xml, and you'll see it's actually provisioning a field, a custom field to our site where this app is going to be activated. And in this case, we do actually want to customize this. So let's create a field. We want to create something that's going to be unique, so we can call this donut rating, but then the display name will simply be rating. This is going to be of type number with a min and a max, so we'll set the max to 100. It's not going to be required, and you can type whatever you want into the group name. This is really just for organization, but for example, I might have a sales group of columns. So let's give that a save. Let's jump into our terminal. We'll stop our gulp serve, and let's go ahead and bundle this and package it so we can get ready to deploy it. Great, so that is all packaged up. Let's jump into our Visual Studio Code, and you'll see in the SharePoint/solution folder, we now have ratingfield.sppkg. So just as before, we're going to drag and drop this to our apps for SharePoint list in the app catalog. We're going to make sure that we deploy this. We do trust it, so let's go ahead and hit deploy. And then you'll see there is that rating field client-side solution. It is not tenant deployed, meaning we have to activate this on a site-by-site basis. So let's go into our site contents. Let's not load our debug scripts. And I'm going to do that thing again where we set reset equals 1 just to reset the cache so it's not constantly trying to load the debug scripts. And we'll go ahead and we will add an app here. And there is our rating field client-side solution. So this will take a moment. We need to keep refreshing on this site content screen until we can actually see that that solution has fully deployed. So we'll give this a couple of refreshes, and as soon as that's done, we will start to use it. Okay, so that has now been deployed, and you will notice if we go to site settings and then you go to your site columns, there is going to be a sales group because we chose our group sales, and we now have this rating column, which is of type number. So that actually deployed on activation to the site where we added that app. It created a whole new column for us, which is a number column. And we can now use this site column anywhere on our site. So if we want to be able to use this in production, we're going to go to site contents. And so, for example, we could create a new list. We could call this list marketing leads. And let's create that list. And then once we're here, we can go into the list settings. So let's hit list settings on that gear menu there. And we can go to our columns list and we can add from existing site columns. And then once we're here, we can jump straight down to our sales group where we created that. And there is our rating column. So we could add that to this particular list. It's going to go ahead and add that column to the list. And now when we go back to marketing leads, I can add a new item. We can say Contoso Ltd. The rating is 75. And as soon as I hit save, you'll see that is now in production. We have a special site column that allows this to be used on multiple lists anywhere we want to do it. You kind of have to opt in. You have to say, I want to use my special rating column. You can't retroactively apply this to a list. But it is a very cool feature if you want to be able to customize your field. And you can do a lot more than just this. You could even have buttons in there that connect to web services and show you related data. You could have a button in there that kicks off a flow operation or uses Microsoft Graph to connect business data from elsewhere. Even pull in some AI stuff. I've seen some really cool ways that people have utilized these field customizers. And really often this is a great way to customize your SharePoint content by creating these customized fields. Great, so that's going to do it for our field customizer extension. In the next lesson, we're going to take a look at yet another extension type that you can implement using the SharePoint framework.